today's topic is exams.
How to figure out what you're in for, prepare for it, and then take it. I'm Allison Christians.
And I'm Leandra Letterman, and it's time to break into tax.
Let's start with the exam is coming. What's the first thing you should do? Start scrambling around and learning every piece of tax law you can learn? No.
First thing you should do is see what you can find out about the format of the exam. Did your professor tell you how many hours are allocated to the exam? And anything about the format. Is it a take-home exam? Is it an exam with one type of question? For example, all multiple choice or all essay? Or is an exam with multiple parts with different types of questions? Is it fully open book, partially open book, or closed book?
What difference does it make if you have this kind of question or that?
Well, it might affect how you study for the exam.
Exactly. Thinking about how to take a 24-hour take-home is just a completely different prospect than thinking about how you're going to race through 50 or 100 multiple choice questions in the space of 2 or 3 hours. So you know what the format of your exam is going to be, and you're thinking about how to organize yourself as you start studying. Now you have a temptation. I'm just going to learn all the rules, right? Or have like a list of the cases or something like that. That might help you in some ways, but that isn't the whole picture when it comes to tax law exams.
I think the single biggest mistake that students make in preparation is where they feel comfortable with the material because they understand it when they read it. But often what tax exams call for is actually resolving the issue. So there's application of the law to the facts. And this might be not just identifying that this is a corporate liquidation, for example, but actually figuring out what the tax consequences are to the liquidating corporation and its shareholders. And for that, there's really just no substitute for working through hypotheticals and problems. And so figuring out what the answers are. In preparing, you probably want to get very familiar with the statutes. Try to get comfortable reading the actual statutory law. It can be a great resource to have with you in the exam if that's permitted material, where you might have written your annotations in the margins, etc. But you might want to get comfortable reading the statutes so that if you need to look something up during the exam, you're looking it up in the primary source. But that's really only a first step. Learning the law is half the battle. You have to really be able to apply it. So you want to do practice problems for a lot of types of tax exams. If there have been applications of the law to facts during the semester, that's probably what you're going to be tested on, at least in part. There may also be testing of policy issues.
Where are the practice problems? Well, probably they're in the lectures that you had over the course of the semester. Most tax professors probably throw in some kind of hypotheticals. So if you don't practice that until you get to the exam, you're probably not going to do it right.
You may be able to access old exams. Some professors provide old exams, some don't, but if those are available, that's a great resource because it gives you an opportunity to go through and work out those problems for yourself. Your professor may also potentially provide some additional problems upon request.
There are lots of commercial resources out there. One of them is CALI, Center for Computer Assisted Legal Instruction, has a database of tax problems. I think most of those are US focused, but lots of commonalities across systems, so they might be useful to you. And work with people in your class. Give each other problems. Try to figure out how each of you might go about solving that problem, and then compare notes.
So let's talk about actually taking the exam. So you've tabbed your material. It's the day of. You walk into the exam. How do you go about taking the exam? Well, first, assess the magnitude of the exam. See how many pages there are. Don't miss a page. Don't allocate your time thinking there are 4 questions when there are 5. Look at the full exam. See if there's point allocations. So make sure you weight your time.
I always look at, well, how many minutes do I have on the exam and how many points are there? And can I make a fraction and then apply the fraction to each of the problems? And I know that takes 5 minutes out of your exam taking time, but it's worth it because then you keep yourself on time.
So once you figure that out, and you start taking the exam, make sure you read the question carefully. Look at the call of the question. In other words, what specifically is the question asking you to do or address? Don't answer questions that aren't asked. You typically will waste time that way and not perform as well on the rest of the exam. So if the question talks about 5 taxpayers, but it only asks the tax consequences for 1, you might need to consider the other taxpayers and figuring out what kind of transaction it is or something, but only answer regarding the 1 taxpayer that's asked about in the question.
Yeah, I cannot stress this enough. Do not use the exam as an opportunity to dump everything you think could possibly be relevant and hope that your professor is going to magically find the relevant stuff somewhere in the dump that you have given them. They're not going to find it, and you're not gaining any favor from that professor.
Time management. While you're taking the exam, if you're really struggling with one question, it's generally best to move on and come back to it, especially if it's not worth that many points. So if there's a lot of 5-point questions and you're struggling with one of them, don't spend a disproportionate amount of time. Try to just earn your points elsewhere, and only if you have time at the end, come back. Something that might help you in answering the question, you may want to draw a little diagram for yourself. Especially if there's multiple parties involved or some kind of transaction, it might help you to sketch it. It's probably worth the time to do that if it helps you really understand where the money flows are going or what kind of transaction it is, for example.
I am a visual learner. There is no way I'm answering any question without writing something on a piece of paper. It's like taxpayer A gave money to taxpayer B. That's very simple, but I'm still going to write A arrow B to myself to remember that's what happened. In a lot of cases, it's making sure you take into account all the details that are happening somewhere, so that if you then have time to check your answer, you can actually look at your drawing and say, oh, I wrote down also taxpayer C. Was there something missing about taxpayer C? And there it is. It's in your drawing instead of in the question, which you probably now read 2 or 3 times. You might not see it in the question, but you're going to see it in your own sketch.
That's right. And I'm not a visual learner, but I do think that for tax questions that involve transactions, it's really hard to keep track of who got what and whose basis is what if you don't make a little diagram for yourself. And you can do that on scrap paper. It's probably just an aid to yourself. So even if the question is multiple choice, you might do that. Even if you're filling out a little Scantron bubble.
Sketching things out also might help you structure your answer, and especially in a long answer format, you do not want to engage in unstructured prose, stream of consciousness writing. If you're time pressured, that's going to happen anyway. There's not much you can do about it. But if you make notes first and sort of organize at least the bullet points, then your answer is going to flow a little bit better and your professor is going to be able to follow your argument. For me, drawing it out, sketching it out is the way to make that happen.
If you've done that and you are taking an essay type exam, you might even then be able to highlight in some way, this is issue 1, this is issue 2, or this is the start of the liquidation discussion, or whatever it is. In summary, find out what you can in advance of what the exam will look like, learn the law, practice applying it to the facts, and then on the actual exam, read the question carefully, see what it's asking for, probably draw some kind of diagram for yourself, and then answer the question that's asked.
Exams are stressful for everyone. What we've tried to do here is give you a little bit to work with in thinking about how to get ready for the exam, how to prepare in your studying, and how to attack each of the questions on an exam.
Thanks for joining us as you break into tax.
See you next time.